Hi, everybody. Welcome to Worth, Wealth, and Women. We are going to keep letting everybody in, and we'll begin about 3 after. So you'll probably hear me say this a couple more times as we let everyone in. Thanks for joining us today. Feel free to put your name and where you're from in the chat. Start chatting with each other. My name is Ashley Northcutt. I'm president of National Women's Affordable Housing Network and extremely excited about today's presentation. Hi, everybody. We are going to get started at about 3 after. We're just letting everyone in. Thanks for joining us today. You'll probably hear me on repeat. If you don't mind, I'm going to put everyone on mute, but you're welcome to come off mute if you have any questions. And you're welcome to put questions in the chat as well. Laura's going to go over that. But thanks for joining us today. Hey, everybody, we're still letting people in. We're going to start about 3 after, so we got about 2 more minutes. Thanks for joining us today. I know people are putting where they're from in the chat. We would love to get to know you, so feel free to put your name and where you're from. It's like a broken record, guys. We should probably do a recording for the beginning of these, but welcome to Women's Affordable Housing Network, Worth, Wealth, and Women. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. We're just continuing to let people in from the waiting room. Laura, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
and I'm just
perfect.
looking through the chat. It looks like someone requested closed captioning. Are we able to do that?
Okay, let me see. Yes.
It's fun to look through and see where everyone's joining us from. This is
I thought we
exciting.
had that set up. Let me see. If anyone is a tech guru, Beth Barr, I see you on here, or has any advice, or Laura, if you know how to do closed captioning, I thought it was set up for that, but I'm looking right now.
Ashley, I'm here. I'm working on it.
Oh, perfect. There's my, thank you, Andrea.
Andrea to the rescue.
Always. All right, everybody, it's about 3 after, which is our magic number when we know people are in mostly, and we're still going to have some people joining as they can. Welcome to Worth, Wealth, and Women with Women's Affordable Housing Network. Today's an exciting day because it's Women's Equity Day. It's very powerful to gather with so many of you who are here shaping the future of wealth and equity in our industry and beyond. So thank you for joining us. I wanted to start with 2 quotes from some of our heroes. Melinda Gates reminds us that philanthropy is not about money. It's about using whatever resources you have at your fingertips and applying them to improve the world. Also, Sarah Blakely, I pledge to invest in women because I believe it offers one of the greatest returns on investment. While many of the world's natural resources are being depleted, one is waiting to be unleashed, and that's women. So here we are today. There is a shift in trillions of dollars into the hands of women, and we're not only inheriting assets, but we're able to reshape what wealth means. Women are giving more, we're giving differently, and we're redefining wealth as more than accumulation. It's about alignment with our values, creating opportunity, and investing in lasting change. This is why today's conversation matters to WAHN. Women's Equity Day is not just about the right seat at the table. It's about honoring the ways women use wealth to strengthen families, communities, and futures. So we're extremely grateful to have Capita sponsoring today's presentation, and you're in for a real treat with Laura Hadley leading this session. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for everyone that came to join us today.
Thank you, Ashley. Super excited to be here. I'm very passionate about There we go. I'm going to unmute. Super excited to be here. I'm super passionate about women in the industry. Women are so powerful and they are great with money. It's just empowering them and getting them the tools that they need. So we have a lot of exciting things to cover today. So we're going to dive right in. Some of the agenda items for today. are talking through the challenges that women face. They are different from men, but women are so important in finance. We'll talk about a few reasons why, just a few of many, of course, and then we're going to talk through some ways to take action, to take steps towards empowering yourself with education. We'll talk through some of the basics. Hopefully, everyone will get a little tidbit of helpful information no matter where you're at with your financial journey that you can take with you. We're going to start off with a little trivia game. We love the chat. I will keep an eye on it. Ashley, if you'll keep an eye on it as well, let me know if we have some questions that come up. Happy to answer questions along the way. If it's something that applies to something we'll chat about later, it may address it later, so keep that in mind. But use the chat. So we have this trivia game. Put your answers in the chat. The one that's closest to the correct answer will send you a little gift card at the end. So I'm going to give you the question. What percentage of women feel confident in investing? I'll give you a couple minutes. Go ahead and put your answers in the chat. We see some coming through. I'll give you about 30 more seconds. You guys are great guessers. And we'll make sure that we get the right the winner their gift card. But I'm gonna go ahead and move on, give the answer. 28% of women feel confident investing. This is compared to 40% of men, which is kind of interesting. So yes, women feel less confident than men do, but also less than half of men also feel confident investing. So men and women both feel a little bit underprepared and overwhelmed in this environment, which is kind of interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. But congratulations, I did see a 28% in the chat, so we'll make sure we get you your gift card at the end. But understanding the challenges that women face in finance. Women live longer than men do. And so there's more time that we have to prepare for retirement. We don't want women outliving these dollars. They tend to live 6 years longer than men do. Another big challenge is the gender pay gap. Women make less money than men do, about 83% of what men earn, not necessarily because they're in the same roles getting paid less, but they're not in those same high paying roles that men are. And this can be attributed to a lot of things, career breaks, moms taking care of babies or their elderly parents. 81% of all caregivers, formal and informal, are women, and they're spending 50% more time giving this care than their male counterparts. So there's so much time that's put into other aspects. They don't have as much time to educate themselves or to build a career, build this income. And that is a big challenge. I was telling Ashley before, I'm a mother and I'm expecting another baby, and I have to think about maternity leave and, pumping at work and all these different things that my male counterparts just don't even have to deal with. So there are some unique challenges that women have in the financial world. Another thing is women just don't talk about money as much. My group chat compared to my husband's group chat is talking about their day trades and what they're investing in and what's doing well. And my friends were talking about relationships. We're talking about people and recipes and bum creams and all the different things, but we just don't tend to talk about money as much as men do. But I think this is a superpower that women have. Women focus on the purpose of money more than the men do. Men maybe are focused on returns, what type of investments we're using, but women want to know, can I retire at this age? Am I going to be able to find a safe home, safe housing for myself and my family? Am I going to be able to travel at all, or am I going to be able to go visit my kids and make sure they're taken care of? So women have this superpower where they are focused on the purpose of the money. It's such a big piece because as you're building your plan, if there's no why behind it, you're going to lose motivation quickly. But if there's a why, I want to do this for my family or for my future, we can build the other aspects into it, the types of investments that we need to meet those goals. But I love starting with the purpose. What's my value for these dollars? And that's why women can be so impactful in the financial world, as they are focused on this purpose of the money. And then societal norms, I feel like for so long, it's just been that men are the leaders in finance, the men handle it. Before I got into the financial world, the financial industry, I thought that all financial advisors were just bald guys in suits. And then when I got into the industry, this is what I found. there are a lot of bald guys in suits. And I say this as a joke. These are all advisors here at Capita. They're fantastic. They're really good advisors, but there aren't as many women in the industry. I kind of fell into it. And I learned I had a passion for it and for helping people. And so often, if we can get women involved in some way, they find that they also are very interested in it and they're really good at it. So changing that societal norm a little bit to get women more involved. And we talked about the confidence gap, that only 28% of women feel confident. And so they don't take action. They don't do anything just because they feel like they don't even know where to start, or they're not good at it enough. Or they feel like the men are just better, when in reality, only 40% of men actually feel confident with it. So the reality is men and women feel this lack of knowledge or preparedness when it comes to a financial plan or savviness. And so these people, they don't ask for help, because they feel embarrassed for what they don't know. So many people that I meet with, men and women, come to us and they're kind of embarrassed. I'm not sure, how I'm invested. I'm not sure where to invest. It's normal. It's just not really taught. They don't teach it in schools, and they don't teach you what a Roth account is and what a 401k is. So don't be embarrassed. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's how you get, started, is asking. So we talked through some of the challenges. What is the importance of women in finance? This is a really interesting statistic. $30 trillion is expected to move into the hands of women in the next 3 to 5 years. Just to give you an idea of what amount of money that is, it's about the sum of the US annual GDP. That is a lot of money that's transferring into the hands of women. A lot of this money is moving because women live longer. The husbands and spouses and partners are dying. They're passing this wealth on to the women. And a lot of these women have never been in the position of being responsible for the finances. So we want to empower them, hopefully before this wealth transfer happens, so they can get involved first and have some more confidence in a plan. But this is cool. $30 trillion going into the hands of these women who have such purpose around their money. Women know the numbers. So as I talk to, couples and single women and men, women know the numbers a little bit better. They drive a lot of the purchasing decisions. They know how much they're spending on groceries. They know how much rent is, or the mortgage, or insurance. They know what the debts are, how much we have to pay towards the credit cards, or how much we have in savings, or how much we need to live off of. Those questions are so important, because then it allows you to know, this is how much cushion we have to be able to save, or this is how much we need to put towards the credit cards, or this is how much we need to live off of, so that we can use those numbers to plan for retirement. Women know the numbers, and so it's so important that as we're making these plans, that the women are involved. I thought it was interesting. Women make 91% of new home purchases. Women drive 70 to 80% of purchasing decisions. So women are so crucial in being a part of the plan. This is interesting. Women are actually better investors than men are. So maybe they're not as confident. But a recent study showed that women have outperformed men by about 0.4% each year. So it's not a huge difference, but it can add up. If you invested $1 million at 7.4% over 25 years, that means you would make over $500,000 more than somebody who earns 7%. So that 0.4% difference over 25 years is over $500,000. So those little increases do make an impact. And you may be wondering, why are women better investors? And it's because women tend to sit tight better than men do. A lot of times there's overactivity with the men. They're trading, they're making decisions more than they should. Or the women just tend to sit tight, let it ride through the ups and downs, and they perform better because of it. I love this statistic because it shows you don't need to be a day trader. This doesn't need to be your new full-time job or part-time job. A lot of it is just getting into something and holding. Don't even worry about it. Don't stress, just invest and leave it. And that alone will allow you to build a lot of wealth. So don't feel like you have to create or become, a new profession. You guys all have your professions that you're really good at, I'm sure. Don't feel like you have to become this day trader. It's just simple steps of getting in, getting invested, get it started, and just sitting tight a lot of the time. Okay, what are some steps that we can take to empower yourself? I think education is so empowering. So we want to provide education. I'm going to provide a few tidbits today, and also some resources that you can access later to be able to continue building that wealth. Now, before you go to the straight building the wealth, there are some what we call financial fires that you want to make sure are taken care of before we jump straight to building wealth. We call them the financial fires because if you let one go for too long, it can take over and ruin your whole plan. So there are 4 things you want to take care of before you start really building wealth. These are the 4 financial fires to avoid. One is not having an emergency fund. So if you feel like you're doing well, you're saving, but then you get in a car accident or your phone breaks or you break an arm and then you have to put it on a credit card and then you go on the credit card and you have some high interest rates and then that just takes over your plan. We want to make sure that you have an emergency fund. Now, if you're just starting out, you're like, we barely have enough money to get by, start with $1,000 in the bank. $1,000 is an emergency fund. As time goes on, build to 3 to 6 months worth of your basic living needs in an emergency fund. If you have a lot more than 6 months in an emergency fund, there's probably some better places that you can put those dollars to earn more. But 3 to 6 months worth in a bank or in a high yield savings account, that's a good amount to have in case you were to lose a job. That gives you a little bit of a gap to be able to find something different. The next fire is high interest debt. This is something that we see so frequently. It gets bigger and bigger unless it's addressed. You just got to face it and get rid of it as soon as you can. And typically this isn't a mortgage. Your mortgage could be anywhere from 2 to 7, 8, 9%. I'm talking, credit cards that are 16 to 35% sometimes interest, or a personal loan that's 15%. These high interest debts, they're just charging you so much money and you're just going deeper in the hole. If we're thinking about it from a financial standpoint, I always tell somebody if they're like, should I invest in my 401k and maybe earn 10%, or should I pay off a credit card that's charging me 20%? If we're thinking about it mathematically, if I use that dollar towards the credit card, I just earned 20% with that dollar because now I'm not paying that 20% interest rate. If I put it in the markets and I earn 10%, wonderful, but I get a bigger bang for my buck by putting it towards that high interest debt. So I love the idea of getting out of debt or using those dollars towards that high interest debt. Now, if you are in a position, you're like, I have so much debt, it's overwhelming, I don't even know where to start. I love the snowball debt method payoff. Dave Ramsey talks about this a lot of times, if you guys have heard of him, but it's basically ordering all your different debts and you find the smallest balance first. Find the smallest balance, pay the minimum on all of your other debts. Now put every last dollar you can towards that smallest balance. Once that small balance is paid off, now you use everything that you were paying towards that smallest balance, pay it towards the next smallest balance. Once that pays off, then you can go toward the next balance. So every time you're getting to those bigger balances, you have more money to attack it with, hence the snowball idea. So by the time you get to your biggest balance, you have a good chunk of money that you can use towards that big balance. And also it feels good. When you pay off that small balance, you're like, yes, I'm making success, I'm making progress. Now let's keep going. Psychologically, it's a lot easier of a way to pay off debt than starting with like your highest interest first. So I love the snowball debt method payoff. Go through, find out all your debts, the balances, start with the smallest balance, pay it off as soon as you can, and then try to avoid high interest debt in the future. Ruined if the unthinkable occurs. So I'm talking about life insurance here. If something were to happen to you or your partner where you passed away and there's no life insurance, that can truly be detrimental, of course, emotionally, but financially to a family. And so getting some life insurance, and I'm all for low cost term insurance. You don't need some fancy whole life, expensive universal life policies. For most people, a good low cost term policy works great. And, starting with maybe 10 to 20 times your salary is a good amount to have in term. Maybe you start off on the lower end and build as you can as you get financially able. But thinking about it, you know, if even if you're not bringing home an income, if you're a caregiver at home, if you're taking care of the kids and something were to happen to you, and now we need to pay for some sort of daycare support to cover what you were doing, you probably need some life insurance to make sure that your financial dependents are taken care of. So making sure you get really low cost term insurance is important. A lot of times you can do it through work, you can get a policy outside of work, but just making sure that you have coverage in case something were to happen. And then the last, oh, we have a good question here. At what point does it make sense to drop life insurance policies when they're not needed any longer? Fantastic question. So we hope that at some point you'll become self-insured. So something happened to you, you have enough money in your nest egg in your plan where your financial dependence would be just fine if we were to lose your income. Sometimes for people, this is when you retire, you're no longer bringing in an income. You know, the only loss of income we'd have if you passed would be Social Security. And so even if we can, so if we can deal with that loss of Social Security without needing extra funds, you're probably self-insured at that point. But if you were to pass away and you still have a mortgage that would need to be covered and you truly would have a loss of income that your financial dependence would not be okay if your income went away, then that's still where we want some life insurance. And we do, you know, we help our clients evaluate this all the time. How much insurance do you need? At what point are you self-insured and you no longer need to pay for those policies? Because they can get expensive as you get older, you know, in retirement. But if you're young, you know, a term policy, if you're pretty healthy, can be really low cost to make a lot of sense. And if you have no financial dependence, if no one would be at a financial loss if you were to pass away, you probably don't need insurance. I mean, thinking through the future, if you think at some point I may have a mortgage and I may have some kids or a partner, and I don't know what's going to happen to my health, I'd rather get a policy now in case I were to get cancer or become uninsurable. I'm just going to get it now while it's cheap. You could think through it that way. If you're like, I'm never going to be financially dependent, I don't have anybody, you know, relying on me, then you may not need insurance. So that's a great question. Okay, the last one is missing out on free money. And you may be wondering, where in the world is there free money? I thought there was no such thing. I think the closest thing to free money in this life is an employer match. So if you work for somebody and they provide you a 401k or a 403b match, take advantage of it. It's the closest thing to free money. And what I mean by this, sometimes your employer plan will say, okay, if you put in 5%, we're going to put in 5% of your income. And so if some people think about it, well, I'm only earning 5%, I'd rather put that money somewhere else and earn more. You're thinking about the math a little bit wrong. If we think about it, if you put in 5% and you get a 5% match, that's a 100% return on your money. You just doubled it instantly. So that is a really good bang for your buck. So put in at least enough to your 401k, 403b plan to get your employer match. And that's one of the easiest places to start investing is inside of a 401k, 403b. It comes out of your pay. I think automation is the key to success. You set it, you forget it. They give you some investment options that makes it easy. So don't overlook the 401k, 403b. It's a fantastic place to start saving. Those are the 4 financial fires. Once you have those areas covered for the most part, you have a plan, you're getting out of your high interest debt, you have a good emergency fund, you have life insurance, you're getting your match. What's next? How can I start to build my wealth? Well, there are a few different areas to understand. One, understanding your accounts. It can kind of be confusing with the different terms you hear, an IRA, a Roth account, stocks. We're going to break it down so you understand the landscape of it. And then the big question, you know, Roth versus traditional. There are a lot of myths out there around Roths. We actually have a YouTube channel that's all around Roth because it's so, it can be confusing and complex. So we like to break that down. I'll give you some rules of thumb to use today. And then what are the basics of stocks and bonds? What are the building blocks of investing that I need to know in order to get started? And then what are some strategies I can use to retire comfortably? So understanding your accounts, they're broken out into 3 different layers. So first you have your account type. This can be a 401k, a 403b, a 457. Those are all employer plans. an HSA, a health savings account, which is tied to, what type of insurance plan you have, which we'll talk about later. And then you have an IRA account as well. An IRA, similar to a 401k, it's just independent of an employer. It's an individual retirement account. So you have the different account type. You can also have a brokerage account as well. But then you have the tax type. So you could have a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA, or you could have a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA. The difference between Roth and traditional, the Roth, you pay the taxes before it goes in. And then it stays in that account and it grows tax-free. When you take the money out later, including the growth, it's all tax-free. Traditional is the opposite. Traditional, you put the money in, you defer those taxes until later. When you draw the money out, then you pay taxes on all of it, the amount you put in and the growth. Some people have this misconception that Roth is always better. That's not necessarily the case. If your tax rate is the same when you put the money in as when you take it out, it actually does not make a difference if you go the traditional route or the Roth route. You end up with the same amount of after-tax money if your tax rate is the same. Now, most people, their tax rate isn't the same when they're contributing to the account versus when they're taking out in retirement. So that's what we got to figure out. When are we going to pay the lower tax rate? Is that as I'm contributing? Or is that as I'm drawing from the accounts? Whenever you're going to pay the lower tax rate, that's when we want to pay the taxes. So if you're at a position where your income is lower now than it maybe will be in the future, I maybe want to be considering Roth. Let's pay that tax now, lock in that tax rate, never pay it again. If you're in the peak of your career, you're earning more than you're actually going to spend in retirement, maybe I'm going to defer my taxes by doing traditional contributions. And then in retirement, I'm going to pull it out when I can pay a lower tax rate. And I have a slide to talk a little bit more about what may apply to you, but that's something to know. Roth is not always the best case scenario. Roth accounts can be amazing, but for some people, the traditional makes more sense. And then once you have the tax type figured out, then you have the investment type. So inside of the accounts, you can invest in stocks or bonds or cash or real estate, small businesses. And so some people will ask me, well, which is going to earn me more money, the Roth account or the traditional account? Well, they can do the exact same. If you invest them the exact same, they can perform exactly the same. So that's something to keep in mind. Those are three different things: account type, tax type, and then the investment type. So going back to our Roth conversation, this is a rule of thumb. It doesn't necessarily apply to every situation, but typically if somebody is in the 10 or 12% tax bracket, that's a historically low tax rate. With the big, beautiful bill that just got passed, it kept these tax rates lower, which is fantastic. So if you're in this bracket, if you're married, filing jointly, your income, your AGI is below 96,000, you may want to look to do Roth contributions now, lock in that rate, that 12% rate, or if you're single, under 48,000. Now, if you're at the peak of your career, if you're married, earning more than 500,000, or if you're single, earning more than 250,000, you're in the 35% bracket. In that scenario, you may not be spending that much money when you're in retirement. So for you, it may make more sense do traditional contributions, wait and pay that tax later in retirement. Now, if you're in the middle brackets, 22 to 32%, so earning for someone married between 96 to 500,000, which is probably a good chunk of people. It kind of depends, if your career is going to continue to build and you're going to go into a higher bracket, maybe we do Roth to lock in some of those lower rates. But if you're like, no, I'm at the peak of my career, I'm going to retire soon, I'm going to be spending less than that, then maybe you'll do some traditional, or maybe you do a split between the two. You do some Roth, some traditional. That's going to give you a lot of flexibility in retirement for controlling your taxes, because you can decide which bucket to draw from. The pre-tax bucket to fill up those lower brackets, and then the Roth before you go into a higher bracket. I know that's kind of deep, but your advisor and a good advisor should help you make this decision, help you understand what could tax rates look like in retirement. Should I be doing Roth or should I be doing traditional? So I know there's a lot of confusion out there, but hopefully this gives you some ways to think about it. Again, we do have a YouTube channel, which I'll show later, and it talks a lot about these Roth questions that you have. Okay, the HSA. This is a little golden nugget that I'm going to share because most of the time that I talk to people, they don't know exactly how this HSA works and how you can maximize its benefits. So the HSA is your most tax efficient account that you have. So if we're comparing a traditional and a Roth to an HSA, the HSA wins because everything that goes in is tax-free and everything that comes out is also tax-free. The Roth and traditional, you're paying taxes on one end. On the HSA, everything is tax-free. Now, a lot of people will use it, so not everyone's eligible for an HSA. You have to be on an HSA eligible healthcare plan, usually a higher deductible plan. Usually your plan will say HSA eligible. If you are on an HSA eligible plan, I highly recommend maxing it out because you get that tax benefit. Now, some people will just put money in and take it out for medical costs. So the money in an HSA has to be used for medical eligible expenses. So you can't spend it on whatever you want. It does have to be on eligible expenses, but there's a pretty broad list of things that qualify. And some people just put money in that year, take it back out that same year to use on medical expenses. Great, you still got the tax-free benefit. But what most people don't know is you can actually put money in the HSA, invest it, let it grow tax-free, and reimburse yourself 20 years later for a medical cost that you had. But in the meantime, that money has been able to hopefully double or triple tax-free. And so this is the way I use it, and I tell my clients to use it. Max out that HSA, just consider it another retirement account. Save for your medical expenses in a different account so you can pay out of pocket for those. Hold on to your medical receipts, and then 20 years down the road, reimburse yourself for a surgery that you had that costs you, $5,000, and spend it on whatever you want at that point because it's a reimbursement. But in the meantime, that $5,000 has hopefully doubled or tripled tax-free. So the HSA is really cool that way in becoming another bucket for you, another resource of tax-free growth. So the HSA is pretty cool. A lot of employers will provide an HSA match as well. So again, don't miss out on free money. If you can get a match on your HSA, for sure, put as much money in there as you can. So if we're talking about order, I would say first put your money in a 401k to get the match, then go to an HSA, max out the HSA, and then go back to putting more money in the 401k so you can get the tax benefit here. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Happy to answer them as we go. But there's your little tidbit golden nugget on the HSA accounts. Okay, what are the different types of investments? What are the building blocks? Stocks and bonds. You guys have probably heard all about these. Forgive me, some of you may know well above and beyond of what we're going to talk about with this, but the basics of the stocks, you are buying ownership into a company. So just an example, if you were to buy an Amazon stock, you now own a piece of Amazon. So if Amazon does well, the value of it goes up, the value of your stock goes up. If the value of Amazon comes down, the value of your stock comes down. So it's more volatile because you're buying that ownership. There's no guarantee. Now, a bond, you're actually lending money to a company. So you say, here, Amazon, I'm going to buy a bond from you, which means I'm going to lend you some money. You can pay me interest to use my money. At the end of this bond term, you need to give me my money back. So it's a little bit more of a clear path. I'm going to get this much interest at the end of my bond term. I'm going to get my money back. If the company were to go bankrupt, you may not get all of your money back. So there is still some risk in, investing in bonds. But if you invest in companies that have their investment grade or have a good credit score, you can kind of think about it that way. Those bonds tend to be more stable. Now, how much do I need of each? What should I do? Let me show you the difference between stocks versus bonds. So this purple line, this is the S&P 500. These are the top 500 stocks in the US over a 10-year period of time. versus the bond. This is the bond, this is the aggregate bond fund. So just a bunch of bonds in the US to kind of represent what bonds do. So over a 10-year period of time, stocks grew 344%, bonds grew 36%. So there's a pretty big difference there. Obviously, those stocks are going to keep up with inflation better than the bonds. So you may be looking at this thinking, why in the world am I going to buy a bond? I'd rather get 344% return rather than the 36% return. Well, when markets don't do well, like in April of 2020, this is COVID. COVID's hitting, the fear of COVID. Markets dropped 33% and pretty fast. You can see that purple line. Stocks dropped fast. Now, the bonds did drop a little bit, but not near as much as the stocks. So the bonds do a really great job of staying more stable during market volatility. So if you need money in the short term and you don't know, maybe stocks could be negative in a year, 2 years, or 3 years. I don't want to put my money at risk. I'm going to put it into a bond fund that's way more likely to be positive in that period of time. So there is an importance to bonds, usually for money that you're going to need in a shorter period of time. 5 to 10 years, we can put into bonds. If your time horizon for the money is longer than that, we probably want a little bit more in stocks to keep up with inflation and make sure that they're growing. Okay, a couple questions. What types of savings accounts do you hold the HSA funds in? So you'll need to set up an HSA account. Health Equity is a common one that a lot of people use, and they provide investment options inside of there. Sometimes if you have an HSA tied to your employer plan, they provide an HSA for you. So it's a special type of account, health savings account, that you can set up and then you can invest in inside of there. Let's see. And then a new bill. So the question is, there's a new bill said to allow investing your 401k into more options beyond stocks. What does that look like? Fantastic question. It really depends on your 401k plan. Some will allow for what are called PCRA, personal choice retirement accounts, or brokerage links, where you can still have it invested in the 401k, but you can invest in things outside of just your 401k plan options, like individual stocks. They still have limitations. You might not be able to do private equity, that sort of thing. There are such things as like self-directed IRA accounts that you can buy actual real estate in. It can get there are a lot of hoops to jump through with those self-directed IRAs. So just keep that in mind. But there are some new possibilities. If you have more questions on it, let us know. But a lot of the 401k is dependent on your plan. Great question. Okay, and then back to the HSA. What is better, an FSA or an HSA? So an FSA is a flexible spending account. You typically lose the balance at the end of the year. So it doesn't have that tax-free growth potential like an HSA. So if you're given the options, I would go with the HSA because you can keep it forever and invest it. But if you don't have the option for the HSA, the flexible spending account is still wonderful. It's just used more like a revolving door. You put the money in, you take it out that same year, or typically you lose those funds at the end of the year. So you just want to make sure you're using the balance every year. Great questions. Okay. Let me go back a little bit. So what are some ways to invest in stocks or bonds? You guys have maybe heard of exchange traded funds or index funds or mutual funds, or you can purchase directly. So if I'm saying, okay, I want to buy into some stocks, how can I do it? One way is to Amazon, for example, and I'm not recommending you buy into Amazon. It's just a company that a lot of people are familiar with. So let's say you want to buy Amazon. You could look up the Amazon stock and say, I want to buy direct ownership into Amazon. Amazon today, they're trading at $228. So to be able to buy a share of Amazon, you have to have $228 to be able to buy in. And then once you do, you're only exposed to Amazon. And maybe you want more exposure because that lowers your risk. We call it diversification. So if I want to buy Amazon and Google and Nvidia and Lululemon and Costco and whatever it may be, but I don't have $230 to throw at each one of those individual stocks, I just want to be able to buy in and immediately be diversified. So you can do that through funds like exchange traded funds and mutual funds. So an example, you could buy in to an exchange traded fund that automatically invests you in the top 500 stocks in the US, like an S&P fund. So you could buy in maybe with $80. You buy in with $80, you instantly own 500 companies. It's an easy way as you're starting out to get broadly exposed to the markets and lower your risk by diversifying without needing to have, $300 to put towards each company. I love exchange traded funds. It's a great way to be exposed to the markets. And it's a really low cost way of doing it. The other option are mutual funds. Mutual funds are similar to exchange traded funds where you can buy into this basket of different stocks, but the internal costs on those mutual funds, which you'll probably never see, they're just built in, can be a lot higher. So you can be paying costs of 0.6 to 1.6% inside of that mutual fund, whereas usually those exchange traded funds, your cost is a lot lower at 0.08% or so. So in a lot of time, and you can tell I'm biased towards exchange traded funds rather than mutual funds, because a lot of times those exchange traded funds will actually do just as well, if not better, than the mutual funds. So I think if you're starting out, a great place to start is find an exchange traded fund, one that maybe invests in the S&P 500. Buy in with $80, set it, forget it. You're already invested in the top 500 companies in the US and let it ride. So those are some thoughts to think about. Okay, let's see here. Gonna go forward. Okay, so how much do I have of stocks versus bonds? Sometimes with a 401k plan, or you'll hear different types of portfolios that you can buy into, from conservative to aggressive growth. What it's usually talking about is how much stock exposure you have. So a conservative investment, the orange is income or bonds, the blue is equity or stocks. So if you're in a conservative investment, you're going to be more invested in bonds than stocks. If we're up in the aggressive growth side, you're going to have more stocks than bonds. You can see there's income and growth, balanced growth. You can kind of see where they lie on that line. Now, what's interesting is it's not a straight line. So for every stock exposure you add, you don't get the exact amount of return. So down here is the risk. So as we go up this scale, we're getting higher risk, but we also, as we go up this way, you're getting a higher return. So if it was dollar for dollar, you put 1% of stock more, you're going to get 1% return higher. It doesn't work like that because it's not a straight line. So you actually get a big bang for your buck at this first little part. You increase your risk a little bit, you get a lot more expected growth. At the top, if you're 90% stock versus 100% stock, you're not going to get quite as high of a return as you did by increasing your stock exposure 10% down here, which is kind of interesting. But where you should be on this scale depends on how long do we have until we need this money. If you're in your 30s and 40s, and you're saving in a 401k or retirement account that you're not going to touch till you're 60, we have 20, 30 years until we need that money. We probably don't need much, if any, bonds in our portfolio. Let's be more on the aggressive side, take advantage of those years of growth. Just don't watch it when things come down. Try not to panic, just sit tight. But your growth potential is a lot higher. Now, if we're getting closer to retirement, we're going to need to start spending this money in 5 to 10 years. Let's start putting that money that we'll need to spend into more bonds. Now, when someone retires, you don't need to be 100% bond, 0% stock. A lot of our retirees are 60% stock, 40% bond, because they'll still, some of this money they still won't touch for 10 to 15 years. So we want to make sure it continues to grow. We just want that short-term money in a safer bucket, so that if we have a year like 2020, your stocks come down, you don't want to have to sell your stocks when they're down 12% so you can buy food and pay the mortgage. That's what we want your bonds for, to stay more stable, draw from the bonds, let your stocks recover. I think women in general tend to be more conservative with investing, which is not always a bad thing, but I think oftentimes women can take on more risk than they sometimes think, and it does pay off. So make sure, it's appropriate, you're diversified. But again, if you're still in 30s and 40s, you probably don't need a lot of bonds in your portfolio. You can be more aggressive on the stock side. Okay, we do have some questions. Okay, wonderful questions. So is there minimum investment needed for the different investment types? Great question. So they have a price to buy into a stock. So example, Amazon, you have to have $228 to be able to buy a share of Amazon. So that's kind of your minimum. Exchange traded funds, you can find different ones that you only need a $20 buy-in, or you only need $150 to buy a share. So it really depends, but they're typically reasonable. If you have $20, $50 to invest, you can start investing in some of these funds. Same thing with mutual funds. You can get lower cost or higher cost, which is kind of neat. So it gives access to a lot of people to be able to start investing, even if you just have a little bit. A little bit adds as time goes on with that compound interest. Okay, let's see. How frequently do you add contributions to a mutual fund or ETF, or do you just buy additional rather than adding to existing one you own? So you will have the different share prices. So if it costs $80 to get a share, if you get more money, you'll just buy more shares as you go. You can choose to buy more into the same fund, or you can add different funds along the way. And that's, depending on the asset level we have, if you have 50 or 100,000, you may be fine, depending on your stage of life and your risk capacity, but you may be fine having everything in an S&P fund. And then as it grows more, maybe you might want to add in some more individual stocks, or I want to add in some smaller size companies and mid-sized companies as well. But you really, as your wealth starts to build 100, 150,000, talk to somebody, make sure you're doing the right thing, the best thing investment wise. But as you're starting out, those exchange traded funds are just a great place to start. So hopefully that answers your question. Great questions, you guys. Okay, going forward. So sometimes as we're talking about risk of women tend to be a little bit more conservative. They don't want to lose everything that they've spent so much time saving and working towards, which I completely understand. So sometimes it's helpful to understand the statistics in the market, how things really do over time. So it's kind of a fun comparison. We're comparing the odds of winning in a casino games versus investing in the markets. You can see on the left, craps, you have a 48.6% chance of winning, slots, 40%. Whereas if we invest in the markets, if you were to invest in one day, what are the chances that your money is positive at the end of the day? 54% chance. So it's not bad. It's almost 50-50. Over a month period, it jumps up a little bit to 62%. Over 1 year period, 73%. And this is why I'll tell people, some people ask me, I'm looking to buy a home in a year. This is my savings. Should I put it in the markets? You could. You have a 73% chance of it being positive, but basically, if you were to invest over 4 years, 3 of those 4 years could be positive, but 1 of those 4 years could be negative. And I would hate for you to be in a position where you just invested. Now your investments are down 10%. You found an amazing home and you have to sell your investments at a 10% loss to buy your home. So if it's money that you need in the next 1, 2, 3 years, rather than investing it in the market, maybe find a good online savings account, a high yield savings account like Discover or Ally, ALLY. You can just look for it online. It's free. And you could earn 3.7% on your money while taking on no risk. So that's a great place for money like your emergency fund, funds you're going to need in the next 3 years or so. Find a safe online savings account, money that you're not going to touch for 4, 5, 6 years. Maybe we start investing some in stocks, some in bonds. As we start to get, 10 years, if I'm looking at dollars like I need this, but not for 10 years, you have a 93% chance of that money being positive over a 10-year period of time. So I'm comfortable investing money that I don't need for 10 years in the markets. It's going to do better. It's going to grow more than those bonds and high yield savings accounts. And the chances of it being negative when I need it are not as high. And so that's why this is so helpful. Over a 15-year period of time, you have a 98% chance of being positive. A 20-year return is, statistically almost 100% chance of being positive. So again, if it's money that we're not going to touch for 20, 15, 20 plus years, yeah, let's invest it in the markets. Let's get some good growth, some good returns on that money to keep up with inflation. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. What are some strategies that can help women retire comfortably? Start as early as you can. I have a fun story. So my husband's grandma, his grandpa actually just passed away recently. And we call her Gramsy, his grandma. So we were talking to Gramsy, we were helping her go through her accounts. She was never involved in it, kind of a more traditional role. He handled the finances, she handled other things. She had no idea what was going on, what accounts she had. So we found that she had a Fidelity account, and we said, Gramsy, what's this Fidelity account? And she said, well, when I was 18, my employer gave me a bonus or something for $200. And she asked help of what she should do with it. And so he set up this Fidelity account for her as an IRA, and he helped her invest that $200. He ended up buying an S&P exchange traded fund, which is kind of fun. So she she put this money in this account. She forgot about it. She had no idea that she had it. She never watched it. She had no idea. Now she's 84. Now, with this account, in this type of retirement account, once you turn 70 or so, the government starts making you take some money out of it so they can tax it. So it's called your required minimum distribution. So she's been getting paid from this account for the last 15 years or so, a couple of $1,000s a year. And still, we found this statement. She has $44,000 in this account today at age 85 from $200. So she invested $200. She never put another dime into it. But just because of that compounding growth, she's not only been taking a few $1,000s a year from it for the last 15 years, she still has $44,000 from that $200, which is really cool. Now, it was over 65, 66, 67 years that it took to grow that much, but $200. So it's fun to see how that compound interest works. As you're starting off, it feels slow. It feels like you're not making much progress. But as time goes on, that money, if you can earn 10% on $100,000 versus 10% on $100, your growth is so much more. So just be patient, start as early as you can, get those dollars working for you. And save as much as you can. It's always hard to know how much exactly do I need to be saving. And again, this goes back to how much do we need in retirement? How much time do we have? What's our risk? And an advisor can help you nail that down. But anything that you have extra, automate it, save it in the 401k, save it into the HSA, have a high yield savings account that you just put money into every month automatically. I think automation is the key to success when it comes to saving. We don't have to decide every month. We just know that money's going towards that. And you'll just thank yourself so much later. It's going to give you so much more freedom later, even if it's harder now. We talked about this, but be aggressive without taking on too much risk. You don't need your whole portfolio in one stock. Let's be diversified, but don't be afraid to be a little bit aggressive, women, and get these good returns. And then, work with an advisor, find somebody that you trust, that is willing to listen to you, that you can ask those questions that feel dumb or simple. Find somebody in your corner that's watching out for you, that can help guide you and educate you and empower you. And then be mindful of healthcare, something else to think about. So, Medicare is your insurance when you're retired. You're eligible at 65. If you retire before 65, there are some other options. Your advisor should be able to help you with this as well, but something just to keep in mind. Okay, we have some great questions here. So this question is constantly torn between saving and putting more money to student loans. I assume paying off the student loans is the right choice because of the high interest, large balance. Great question. I'm all for getting out of debt, and we want to make sure our financial fires are taken care of. So if, build an emergency fund, at least $1,000 before you start saving or putting money towards student loans. Make sure you have insurance, make sure you're getting a match inside of your 401k. I think the student loans typically don't have crazy high interest rates from what I've seen. A lot of times you can refinance them if it's a true student loan and get those lower. So if we're thinking about it mathematically, if I'm paying 7% on a loan, or if I'm averaging 10% in my investments, well, if I put it in my investments, I'm earning 3% more. But we still want to pay off that debt. We want to make sure we have good habits of getting out of debt. So sometimes you can find a balance kind of depending on those interest rates. If your interest rates are high, 12, 13, 14%, just put everything towards the debt. Get the match in the 401k, make sure you have a good emergency fund, but pay down that debt as fast as you can and then start saving. But if you have a mortgage that's at 2%, I don't think you need to pay a ton extra towards that mortgage and only earn 2% with those dollars. If it were me, I would save it, elsewhere, earn 5, 6, 7%. And then later on down the road, you could take a big chunk and pay off the mortgage. So you can always compare the interest rates of what you're going to earn by saving versus the student loans. But I am biased towards getting out of debt as quickly as you can, as long as your financial fires are taken care of. Great question. What if we already have a Roth? Should we exhaust this one first, then open a new one to invest in S&P companies? You should be able to invest in like the S&P 500 companies within your Roth. So if you have like a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, you typically either way can invest inside of these S&P funds. I hope that answers your question. It looks like someone answered and said they opened a Roth at Fidelity. So anybody can go, you could set up an account. It takes 5-10 minutes to set up an account at Fidelity or at Charles Schwab. Open up an account and you can start to invest in those funds there. And they have some resources to help you start. Okay, educate yourself, empower yourself. It's kind of interesting. The more you get into it, the industry, it is fun to learn. We have lots of educational resources that are free for people. We have a podcast called The Financial Call. You can find on any platform. And if don't worry about jotting these all down. If you guys want a copy of these slides, I think Ashley said they'll have a copy or this recording on their website. You can also, we have a QR code at the end you can scan to get our information. We can send you the slides as well. But the YouTube channel we talked about, it's called the Zach Call Money Education channel. Lots of great resources on there. We also have an education center on our website, Capita Financial Call. If you want to get on our regular email list, we do regular boot camps for people that want to learn more, quarterly market updates to tell you what's actually happening in the news, what's going on. We actually have a book, the 7 Prosperity Projects book. You can find it on Amazon. It tells you what order to tackle different steps in your financial journey as well. Build a support network, find people around you that you can engage in these open money conversations with. Find an advisor that you trust that's willing to listen to you. I want to end with this quote: give a woman $1 and she can put it to good use. Teach her about how money really works and she can change the world. I love that. I think women are so powerful, can have such a strong impact. Thank you for letting me join. I didn't give a clear introduction on who I was. I'm a financial advisor. I work with Capita Financial Network. We're an investment, advisory firm based out of Utah, but we work with people all over the country. Happy to sit down, provide a free consultation for you to see if we can help with your situation. If you're interested in scheduling, you're welcome to scan this QR code. It gives you access to a calendar. You can schedule a time. Happy to answer any questions you have, so feel free to reach out.
Laura, that was amazing. My dad has drilled some of this into me my whole life, and I still get confused. So this was an amazing presentation that made it very light to understand. So thank you very much. A plug for Capita too. When we met Capita, one of the things we loved most about them is they do work with women, but also as your wealth starts to build, a lot of financial advisors require that you have a certain value before they will work with you. And it's very exciting to hear that Capita works with women and is a lot more flexible in that. So definitely set up a call with them. We're going to invite them back to Summit. They also spoke at the last Summit, and they're very helpful and knowledgeable. And as you saw, top-notch presenters. So Laura, amazing job. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Enjoyed it.
Everybody have a great day. Thank you.